who's in the room? I can't really see. We got Rebecca?
Why don't we go around? I'm here. Go around.
Stephanie,
Okay.
Secord Public Information Officer, remind
Hi,
everybody.
Stephanie.
Hi, Counselor.
Hi, Counselor. Hi, Allison. It's Rebecca.
Great.
Hey, folks. Kevin's here. Charette.
Oh, good.
And Tom
Okay.
Rooney. Hi, John. Hi, Allison.
Hey, Tom.
Hi, Tom.
Okay, well, I just wanted us to get together to go over the Ellis and Tanner drafted and think about webpage information to go with that. My hope was that when we meet next week, we could vote to move ahead with the survey if we could finalize it in the intervening period. And then we can get the copy in, Stephanie, because we need to have that in by the middle of the month, right?
Correct.
Okay. So I think on our agenda first, we had an update from Kevin on CPCNH, and then I'll update you on my conversation with all the members of the board of Portsmouth Smart Growth, very enthusiastic partners, ready to go on the event on June 29th. So Kevin, why don't you kick us off?
Sure. And I do have a little handout here. I don't know, John, what I sent you last night, did that make it to the folks or not?
Yeah.
The CPCNH update?
Yes, that and the Lebanon Community Power both went out.
Excellent.
John sent those out.
Great.
I'm not sure I got an update. I did get the surveys from Durham and Walpole.
Yeah, I sent those separately to everybody yesterday afternoon, and then last night I had whipped together a couple things to John that I guess some of you received.
Yeah, I didn't get that.
Yeah, I don't think I got that either.
Okay, well, I have handouts here, so for what it's.
Yeah, they're
and-
also on the website for this meeting, so.
Okay.
Oh, maybe that's where I took it.
Okay. And Allison, if you don't have it, sorry, I can send it to you after the meeting as well, a hard copy.
Okay, that'd be fine. Thank
So-
you.
So I'll make this brief, but I just, there's
you.
just a one-pager here.
Peter, do you want?
Peter, do you have one?
I think I have it right here, this one, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So just a real, 50,000-foot snapshot from a CNH perspective. We had the annual meeting of the organization was April 21st up in Webster, New Hampshire, and Councilor Tabor, Peter Rice, and myself did attend. And while the agenda was extensive, a couple just takeaways. It was exciting that Portsmouth was installed and recognized as the, I think, 19th member of the organization, and the board took a vote and was happy to have us, as well as myself and Peter being brought on board as representatives of Portsmouth to the organization. And the other just highlight is Clifton Below, who had, I think, was the vice chair, is now the chair of the organization. So he is officially in that role. I think the vice chair at this point is Chris Parker from Dover. I think the deputy city manager over in Dover. I had an opportunity to meet Chris yesterday. So that was the annual meeting. I'd say probably the biggest thing in flight right now, as the organization approved at that meeting and sent out on the 25th their request for proposal for a whole slew of services to support the organization, because the vast majority of this organization is going to be sourced, and they're getting third-party services to kind of run the gamut of what it's necessary to operate, and there's going to be more of a skeleton crew from a internal staffing perspective. I included on the page here the four major segments of the request for proposal, and if you're so inclined and maybe having a little difficult sleeping, it is, you can go to their website, and it's on their landing page, and you can click on it and look at the document. It's 50 or so pages, and there's a number of additional supporting documents like their business plan, et cetera, that are there. But it's a comprehensive document that the group had been working on for some period of time. And at the board meeting, it was approved and released on the 25th to a whole bunch of vendors that operate in this space. And they had already done an RFI, request for information, some number of months ago. And so they had already kind of generated interest in the market in terms of that this RFP was going to be forthcoming. So on the page here, I just broke out the kind of the 4 major segments of services that they're looking to obtain. And one is in a bucket called organizational development, and this is really, in many ways, kind of putting together the structure of their operation. And, you know, from policies and procedures to services to help with the preparation of their budget, cost-sharing agreement, all sorts of things that they've been working on, but they're also looking for these vendors to comment on them and perhaps come forth with other solutions or other approaches. Then there's a segment of the RFP that's all about recruiting new members to the coalition and getting support to make that happen. You know, they've been doing it now for the past year or so with, you know, Samuel Golding and Henry and Clifton and so forth, but they are looking to bring in resources that would really oil this process and bring resources to bear that they can have a repeatable process going across the state of New Hampshire and bringing on new members in kind of an organized, efficient manner. And then there's a whole segment that, you know, some of the things we're interested in here, just the area I was just talking about around their marketing and their branding, developing their web presence, and so forth. Then there's an area around all the support services to launch for the communities to go live. And I mentioned a little bit further in the document here, their tentative go live right now is April of 2023 for the communities that are ready to go at that point in time. But they're looking for services, you know, from implementation planning, regulatory compliance, et cetera, how to go about setting the rates for the communities that are participating in the coalition. So that's all part of a bucket of services called launching the programs. And then I'd say where the rubber hits the road is in the last segment. This is their kind of the operational services to run the place on a day-to-day basis, on a going forward basis. And, you know, you can read through those. I did highlight the one that's, you know, probably the most important and the most complex is all the activity that's around securing power, forecasting what the power needs are going to be for the community, securing that, and managing that portfolio on a real-time basis internally with this model. And I asterisked and footnoted below at the bottom of the page kind of the activities that are within that bucket. And any of the areas that I've boxed out here, there's a whole bunch of like sub-activities that are in those, but I just tried to you know, give you the high-level snapshot. So this is the document is comprehensive, and they recognize kind of from A to Z they need to stand up this operation. It's largely from, you know, third-party support with a handful of folks internally. The responses are due to the RFP on June 15th. And then between now and June, they're responding to questions from the vendors. They're having some webinars that the vendors can participate in to ask questions. So there's a lot of activity that's going on between now and June 15th to position these vendors. And the vendors, there might be one vendor that says they can do it all. They may partner with other vendors and say, okay, you know, our expertise here, you know, we'll partner with another firm that has expertise in another area. So the RFP is designed to allow a group of vendors to come together and deliver a joint proposal with one being the lead. So this is going to play out over the summer, and the coalition right now is targeting August or September to make their proposals to the board of directors as to, the vendor or vendors that they're recommending, and then followed by negotiations and standing up these services, hopefully in the fall, because then the runway to go live in April of '23, if that's going to happen, is not extensive, and it's going to largely be executed by all of these vendors with, some level of oversight internally by some staff and the board of directors. Any questions on that, on the RFP?
Yeah, questions for Kevin? That's a great wrap up, and the RFP is huge. It's really how they put the pieces together.
Yep. And then the other kind of big thing that's getting going is they formed a search committee to identify a CEO of this organization, or it may be called something else, executive director, but the point person for the coalition. And a search committee has been formed. They have a draft job description that was largely put together by Samuel Golding, who's the consultant that's been working with this organization for a bit. And there's a little bit of urgency to get a CEO on board by the time these contracts are let. So, there's leadership at the coalition that's overseeing really a broad array of scope here that's going to be, stood up in the fall.
I had a couple questions.
Sure, go ahead, Pete.
Is it too early to get the level of interest or on the RFP? Have they get a sense of that yet, or has it just been released?
There was a good deal of interest in the RFI.
Okay.
And it's really the same cast of characters, I think, that the RFP is going out to.
Great.
So, interesting enough, from my kind of background, we'd send an RFP to maybe 8 to 10 companies that we were very interested in. They really shotgunned this out to the industry initially to probably well over 50 companies that operate in all this space with the RFI to kind of get the, hey, we're here, we're going to need help. And
Do you have to respond to the RFI to participate?
I don't believe so, Becca.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think it was again to, I think, generate interest and kind of get the ball rolling.
And so they don't have any funds for the CEO or the companies? They're just they're all gonna, or do they have something they're gonna string them along with?
Yeah. So I wasn't going to get into the weeds there too much, but they're asking for these vendors to come on board and self-fund initially until there's a revenue stream within the coalition. They go live and they're in a position to generate revenue. So the RFP there's a lot of discussion in there around that's part of the stipulation that they would have confidence that the coalition's going to be stood up, bring in monies, and then eventually pay them.
Yep.
Counselor is closer to some of the funding that the coalition is trying to get from a grant perspective, but I think that's largely to fund salaries for internal staff, to bring the CEO on board and maybe a handful of other support staff that'll oversee this scope.
Yeah.
But that funding is, I think, more internal. But they're really looking for these vendors to be agreeable to kind of eating their cost as the organization has stood up. I don't know, Counselor, if you want to add to that at all, you're closer.
Yeah, they've also got $75,000 seed money from the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation. I think there's more that will be coming from that. And there's some foundation money that I'm actually, there'll be a group working on that as well, too. So it's important that they have some seed money at this point, and that's in process.
Yep. So it's an interesting little model to bring on these resources, and you know, they'll have to have faith that the coalition is, you know, is going to be stood up and have a revenue stream, and, you know, for all, you know, there's no reason to believe that it's not going to be, but they're not going to be paid initially. And go ahead, sorry, Counselor.
Tom Rooney may be aware of this too. There's been discussion with Clean Energy New Hampshire as well, and I think there was some talk of a joint fundraise, but I think in the end, we're looking at the coalition needing a certain amount of seed money to get going, and that'll stay focused on just the coalition.
Yeah. And then I guess in the critical path that right now is the adoption of rules by the PUC around aggregation. And so that is ongoing, and the coalition is one of the stakeholders that's quite involved with that, with Clifton and others. And the coalition is targeting now realistically that it, you know, hopefully that there's a decision and adoption of the rules by July. That's where what they're putting in their kind of critical path chart right now, that it would be in July. And as I already mentioned, there's going to be, their expectation is that the go live would be in the April-May timeframe. And there's some rationale behind the way the utilities manage default service and when they go out to bid and when those 6-month contracts are put in place, that gives the coalition windows during the year, kind of the sweet spot to go live. And so it's like April, May, or I think it's a couple months in the fall. So they're really shooting to go live in the April, May timeframe if you know, can get all of this together. And it would be some number of the cities and towns that have that are on board. You know, some of the earlier cities and towns have already put together their plans and have them sitting and waiting. Right. And until the rules are approved by the PUC, the plan, a town or city's plan, can't be brought forward to the PUC for approval. And those plans might have to be modified a bit once the rules are written to make sure they're in compliance with the rules. So there's a handful of towns that were the early adopters of the coalition that are ready to rock and roll once the rules are written. And then there's others that are at different points in time. And obviously Portsmouth is, you know, really at the starting point of that.
So are the rules that you talked about, the rules that they're writing and hoping to put in place by July,
Yep.
rules that are going to be approved by the PUC?
Yes.
Those are the rules? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So it's really just how this is all going to work on a day-to-day basis, how the coalition's going to work with utilities, going to work with customers, going to work with the suppliers, just all the rules of the road for aggregation. You know, you know, the regulation has been written, you know, approved for allow aggregation in the state, but now really the nits and grits of how it works on a day-to-day basis is really the rulemaking that is going through kind of the sausage-making process right now. And I think they're positive about the progress that is being made, but all the different stakeholders, the utilities, the coalition, the suppliers are all weighing in and trying to get their points of view, and it's not a quick process, and so they're looking at June or July as the time frame that they're hoping, that they're counting on to support, because if you look at their critical path between now and then in April go live, there's a series of things that have to really happen reasonably on schedule to make that happen. Okay.
Makes sense.
And then just finally, you know, from a Portsmouth perspective as it relates to the coalition, and this is just kind of me speaking in terms of the next broad steps. Obviously, we're beginning engagement, what we're here to talk about tonight, of our residents and education. And we are now also in a position where we can submit through to Eversource serves all of Portsmouth, we can send in a request to Eversource to get our load data at the aggregate level, based on, industry, commercial, residential, and get our data from the utility, not at the customer level, but at the aggregate level. So we have that as part of data that we need to start putting together our plan.
Excellent. Was that part of the PUC approval?
That's part of, yes, that's part of the kind of the cycle here that given that we're moving forward and, assuming we're moving forward to develop an energy aggregation plan, the step that we now can, there's a process and there's a letter and a form that has to come from the city to request our data, and that takes a little bit of time, but that we would then have that and understand at a high level, but broken down by class, industrial, commercial, and residential, what our load is.
That's what we tried to get when we were doing our greenhouse gas inventories, and always had a huge challenge
Yeah.
getting it. So
Yeah.
it's great to hear that that's going to be available. Is it available public, will it be available for the municipality to use in its greenhouse gas inventory, or only for the aggregation, and is it?
Peter, I'm not sure. I don't know. I would assume once you have it, you have it, but.
I was going to say, once
yeah.
the city has it, it's public, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was talking to Peter Rice, and we'll coordinate the kind of the forms and whatnot that have to get submitted to the utility, because supposedly they haven't been turning it around as quickly as maybe we'd like. So that's happening. And then it's really just, we as a energy advisory committee can start to think about our plans and objectives of what we were looking to do, what timing we're looking at as far as potential go live, and actually start to work on our electric aggregation plan. And the coalition has provided a template that it's in many ways kind of a fill-in-the-blank document with any nuance that's specific to a city or town, but we're not starting from scratch. These are pretty comprehensive documents, but the plan itself, the template for the plan exists, and we would modify it as we see fit, but much of it is a kind of a plug and play in terms of filling out data specific to Portsmouth. And then ultimately, you have your plan, you're going to have hearings. There's a requirement to have a couple hearings within the city. It gets approved by the city council. And then once it's finalized, then it's ready to get submitted to the PUC for approval. And as I mentioned earlier, nothing gets submitted yet because the rules and regulations haven't been finalized. So there's nothing that says we as Portsmouth, as an energy advisory committee, can't start the process of putting our plan together. And the plan is kind of generic, whether we decided to go all the way through and get our supply from the coalition, or whether we decided we wanted to get our supply elsewhere. It's not lost work to start putting the plan together, because it's a community power plan. It's not a plan specific to the coalition. Yeah. So I know I've been rambling here, but those are the points I wanted to
That's
make.
great.
Yeah.
That's great,
good.
yeah.
Super helpful.
Oh,
Yeah, I think you gave us the future forecast of what our work is to be, too, and I think that's great. One of the benefits of engaging the community now is we get a sense for our strategic goals based on what people are saying. How much clean energy, how much renewable energy, how much desire there is for that, and versus pure cost. And so, I think it all works hand in glove. If we get this engagement going now, and this very light survey out there, we'll get some directional feedback from the community and get people talking about it as things work towards the fall when we actually put a plan together.
One thing, Counselor, I mentioned one of my notes yesterday is, from what I've tried to find out which cities and towns have done surveys and talk to them, and I mean, we can do whatever we want. I mean, but what I've got from other cities and towns is that they've they did some level of education first and then surveyed. Durham's in the process of doing that now, and the note I sent around, the gentleman from Durham said they felt strongly that any data they got before there was some level of education might be of less value. So the approach I've heard from other towns is that they start the education process through multiple channels and then survey a little bit out once people have in their noggin what this is all about. And also from everything I've seen is that there's not a real heavy focus on the coalition. It's on community power. Like, what is community power? Why is it a benefit? And the notion of the coalition is brought in a little bit further downstream, so as to not introduce complexity around what is that organization, and try to educate folks first on what is community power and why it's important and why we would be doing it, and et cetera, and then start to feather in the notion of the coalition. I'm just mentioning what I've heard from other communities, that they've kind of approached it that way.
I remember that we discussed this, and I think that was why I had such a short, just 2 questions, and just to get a feeling and to provide a little bit of education regarding their energy bills. That was why I posed the questions the way I did, because we had talked about the fact that they need education before you're actually going to give them the survey, so that they have a better understanding of what it is that you're asking for. So that was why I did these 2 brief questions, just as a taster, to see where our clientele are at this point.
Right. I'll just jump in and recap what's happened with Portsmouth Smart Growth. I talked to them week before last Saturday. They're very eager to host an event. We moved it to June 29th so that we could get Henry Herndon to speak from the coalition. The event would really be, what is community power? And they're looking at 3S as the venue, looking at a Zoom component, and we're thinking speakers could be Henry, also possibly Julia Griffin from Hanover, just because Hanover set very ambitious goals for their amount of renewables, and they want to be pretty much carbon neutral, and they view community power as a big part of that. So I thought, the Smart Growth folks and I thought that she might be a good speaker, and then there's a survey. But that's really interesting input, Kevin, from the other towns about the educational component. I kind of view this very short survey as a way to get that people thinking, get a lot of households thinking about it, which, and then we try to educate and inform at this event. But I'm open to what all you guys think, and if you think that the better way might be pure information, we could do that as well.
I don't know how many others of you know about a New Hampshire network.org. They're sponsoring a community power, Get Some for Your Town. It's educational. It's going to be May 9th from 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. And Henry Herndon, Lisa Sweet, and Sam Evans Brown from Clean Energy New Hampshire are going to be speaking at this. So if anybody's interested, I can send you the link so that you can register for it if you're interested in seeing it.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, this, again, just me speaking. I'm more in the camp, Counselor, to start our education. And, whether it's through, a one-pager in the water bill, as we were talking about, stand up the website and have, begin to feather in information there, these events like at 3S, and, you know, another article in the newspaper, et cetera. I'm just thinking that there might be some benefit, and I'm thinking out loud here, but there might be more benefit in my mind to stand up more in the way of education and then start to survey and ask people what do they think about what they're hearing and what they're being told. Because I think for the vast majority of the residents, it's kind of a foreign concept. And the objectives just aren't around renewables. I mean, the four primary objectives, and then there's some good information, I think, in the Q&As here, but local control, lower cost, renewables, and then resilience and innovation.
And that's from Community Power, or?
This is, when we get to a point, this was a FAQ that Hanover recently had that I think has some very nice language that could be ported to our website. And just things like, you know, what is community power? And it has some good graphs. And then, you know, some questions around, you know, would everybody be required to join? You know, would the local utility continue to deliver my energy? But what are the benefits of community power? There's some good information here in graphics in the Hanover FAQ that is vetted language that, because the coalition has used it in various documents, et cetera. But I just, you know, so we're not spinning our wheel. I just, Stephanie, as we were looking at web information, there might be some content here to start to introduce things.
I was just wondering because we do have a page for the committee, and we have a link to a document that is FAQs about this. I was just looking to see which document it is, so
Yeah.
I can tell you
But-
that.
Yeah, we already have a really nice platform where we could start, you know, feathering in information. And I think, you know, Allison's idea of putting out the what are we calling it, survey light, maybe survey is even the wrong word. It's sort of like teaser questions to get people to sort of go to the webpage, you know, inform them about this event coming up at the end of June, and kind of direct them right to our webpage where we have this kind of beefier FAQs, and that's our kind of housing place for informational links. So maybe it's not really even a survey, right? Or, I mean, it's more of these two questions to sort of get them to,
Right.
I don't know. I don't want to speak for Allison, though.
No, that was exactly what I was going to say, Rebecca.
Okay.
And what struck me about it, looking at your questions, is that this isn't a survey about, are you interested in participating in the community power project? It's getting you to focus on your energy bill. And
Right.
it's a way, asking questions is a great way to get people to be thinking along the lines that you then want to provide information.
If I recall, I don't have it in front of me, but one of the questions I was specifically referenced the coalition.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's what you want to do right out of the gate, because, I mean, we have not made a commitment as a city to get our supply through the coalition. I think the focus should be on community power at this
So
point.
that can be changed. Instead of saying the city of Portsmouth is pursuing an agreement with Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire, city of Portsmouth is interested in pursuing community power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think at some point the coalition's got to be kind of feathered in and introduced, but I don't know if
Not
it's
right now.
at the beginning.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it simplifies it. Like you said, there's really no reason to get into a lot of detail about that. We're really looking to
Yeah.
raise the awareness.
I mean, even if we're obviously leaning very heavily toward that, it's a model to implement, and it's not the concept itself.
Right.
What
I
is-
think if we said, you know, City of Portsmouth is looking at aggregating the community's electricity demand for, you know, aggregated purchasing or something like that. and rather than making it all the whole list, and as Allison says, we can change that.
Yeah.
How are we planning to, how would this be sent out? Is it electronic or?
Yeah, I think that what we were talking about was putting a little flyer in with the water bill, or even putting it on a page of the water bill, something that says, something about, community power is coming, are you ready, or something like that.
Yeah.
And then getting them to go to this link that we supply to them, which then provides them with this survey light, or whatever you want to call it, and link to the webpage and to the information about the June 29th meeting at 3S to learn more.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the timing for the water bill, that's the thing we kind of need to act quickly, right? Like,
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that-
Middle of the month.
Middle of the month.
okay.
Yeah. So that would reach 8,500 households, if I remember correctly, around the middle of June. And it would give people a way to interact with it, with us through the survey and build their awareness. And then we could have the call to action, want to learn more, attend this event at June 29th.
Yep. Would it be helpful
That was
if,
our original concept.
I don't know if we actually mocked anything up yet for inclusion, but would it be helpful if a couple of us just mocked something up? It's an 8.5, right? Folded 3 ways? Or folded
I'm
twice?
not even sure how they're folding it. We give them an 8.5 by 11 Word document.
Okay.
All right, maybe we can give them a PDF. It's a basic, just
Okay.
one sheet, no,
Can it be front and back?
I don't think so.
Because if it could, I mean, we could put a little,
I think that would be great.
if we could put a little more information and a couple graphics, but that, if it was a 2-page, if we could do front and back.
I'll find that out tomorrow. I know it's very limited. I mean,
Yeah.
I expected,
Yeah.
having done bill inserts forever, I
Yeah.
expected to do a third of a page that just goes right in. We can't do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Has to be an 8.5 by 11 sheet.
Yeah.
And then they print it as they print the bill. And we don't have the option, the way I understand it, to print on the bill. It's another page.
And separate
It's a
insert.
separate page inserted into the bill
Okay.
Yeah.
envelope.
But if we had a section like, what is community power, what are the benefits, and then remind them that the utility is still going to be the distribution company.
Yeah.
It'd be a good, for most people reading that, it would start to at least get their heads around this idea, And if we were able to have content on the webpage, and we could then
Linking them
link
there.
to that off of the one-pager in addition to the event.
Yeah.
Well, I think we may have talked about it this last time, the idea of putting a QR code on the page, because printing a URL, people can copy it, but they generally don't.
Do both, right?
But if you have, and yes, you would do both. So the QR code could lead to the 2 questions, which then allow you to automatically tabulate the responses instead of having to do it manually. It's entirely useful to still have the manual option, because many people who get the water bill aren't going to have access, we find, to going online to do it. But,
Yeah.
so making it easy and giving people lots of options. But the QR code does seem to work
The
well.
Durham survey is using a QR code.
Yeah, I'm not surprised, because people, one of the things COVID did
Yeah,
for
COVID brought
us-
it back, didn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
code?
Yeah,
I love the
seems
QR
like it.
code. I guess so. Two questions for you all. Do we want to collect, if we're just asking these sort of teaser questions, do we want to actually tabulate the responses, or is it really just a way to get people to learn about the event, go to the webpage? I mean, I guess they can click if you want to be for more information.
Yeah, because
I'm
that
just wondering
page
if we
has
actually
the
wanna
ability to
tabulate.
subscribe to the list that then the city keeps in MailChimp as an Energy Advisory Committee interest list.
So, just a,
My answer to your question, Rebecca, speaking for me, is I think it would be a nice element of the event on the 29th if we could say, here's how you all responded to that survey.
that's right.
And we could also have the responses on the webpage. Because I think, you know, transparent feedback's always good, I think. You
Yeah.
can see, oh, yeah, look.
Yeah, even if it's not positive, because you might get, you know, a majority of people say, I'm not interested in community power. I can't remember how it's questioned.
Yeah.
But that would at least just say, you know,
I'm
give us a
remembering now.
challenge to turn that opinion around in future surveys,
Yeah.
right?
I thank you both, and Counselor, I'd forgotten, because I think a few weeks we were talking about too how it might be helpful for the speakers to have that knowledge before they're presenting to the crowd as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure it'll be a friendly crowd if they're actually coming to 3S to learn about it, but it'd be helpful for them to be a little bit more prepped. So, okay, I think that'd be good.
I mean, my sense is that our community is people at an individual level would like.
You're breaking up, John.
I said, my sense is that when I'm out talking to people in the community, there's a desire to do something about our carbon footprint and do that on an individual level. But we'll find out.
Yeah.
Okay.
I did have a comment on one of the questions. Did we want to get into that detail or tonight or no?
Sure. I mean, I'm happy in the next, if we want to try and get this copy ready for this insert, I mean, I'm happy to tackle that if there's another volunteer. So it'd be good to tweak the language. And I think, was it next week at our larger group, we wanted to approve that copy? Is that the process?
Counselor.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, let's get input on the questions.
Allison, do you have the questions, Allison?
I do, and I'm changing it as we speak, and I'm just going to send it out to everybody.
Is there a way to screen share it?
I don't think so, because it's on a different computer.
Oh, okay.
I have it printed out.
You have it printed out? Okay.
Yeah.
Can you read
Just one, yeah. So the first one, and this was the one I had an edit on. Utility companies are responsible for delivering electricity to your door, but you have a choice to purchase your energy from a third-party supplier that has options not otherwise available from your local utility company. Eversource is the default electricity distributor for Portsmouth. Is Eversource also the company that determines the source of the electricity to run your home? Yes or no? And there was just the final part of that had me a little confused on what, were we asking, are they buying from a third-party supplier or not? I think that was the question, right? Are they getting default?
Yeah, but I'm not sure that they would understand what a third-party supplier was, but I know that when Durham asked that question, they put it very succinctly, and they told them where to find out on their bill.
Yeah.
Who was doing it, so I think that would be a better way to put that question.
Although, so what I was thinking is, because at the beginning, I pulled up my bill and just was looking, so I buy from a third-party supplier. Most people that do, I think, would be familiar with the concept. And if they're not familiar, chances are they're not probably, they're even aware that either they're not doing it or they're even aware that it's an option.
Tom, can you read that again, the language?
Sure. Utility companies are responsible for delivering electricity to your door, but you have a choice to purchase your energy from a third-party supplier that has options not otherwise available from your local utility company.
Maybe just add the word, did you know that you have did you know?
Right, but you have, yeah, but did you know we could make that a question? Then Eversource is the default electricity distributor for Portsmouth.
They're not the default, they are. There's no
Yeah, so
choice.
that's, yeah, that,
There's no choice with the distribution company. The utility is the distribution company. They're the default energy supplier if you don't choose a competitive supply. So they're not the default utility. They are the distribution company.
right, Eversource is the electricity
Is the
is the
distribution
electric
company, of
distribution
course.
company for
Right.
Portsmouth, yeah.
And they're your default supplier if you don't choose a competitive supplier.
And that's
Yeah.
the second part of the
Yeah,
question.
Right.
So maybe if we start with that, Eversource is the energy supplier in Portsmouth.
Well, not supplier, that's,
Sorry, distribution.
yeah, distribution.
Within the distribution can come from Eversource or an alternative. Which one do you use? I mean, I really
Yeah.
think we need to make this as simple as language as
And
possible.
you could probably, and we probably can't wordsmith it as a group, but I think interchanging energy and electricity is, I think, is a little confusing, because it's almost like you're making a distinction when we're not. They're interchangeable, so we should be consistent. And probably either is probably fine. Maybe electric is better, because that's what we're talking about.
I think electric is
And I was
better.
just between, there's distribution and there's supply.
That's where it gets confusing.
And
So
then
the
No matter
utility
what.
is the distribution company, will continue to be the distribution company. As a resident, you have a choice as to what supplier you have.
Right, and
Right.
third-party supplier is good, because that's right off the bill. If you look at your bill, it's right on there. Or, if you don't, well, I assume it's right on there, but if you have, it probably
You
says
have a
default
third-party
service
supplier.
otherwise.
Does it say default service or does it say service?
I think
wonder.
it says default service, but I don't know, I can't look at my bill.
Yeah, because you have a third party,
Right.
yeah.
If your supplier is Eversource, it says your supplier is Eversource. There's a supply section and distribution, and it just says your supplier is, and if you don't have a competitive, it says Eversource.
Okay.
And if you're with Direct Energy, it says Direct Energy.
Well, it does say third-party supplier,
Yeah,
and then it gives the name.
yeah.
So, yeah, we could figure that out, so just ask somebody. And then the final part of the question, third-party supplier, you're right, might confuse some people, but again, I just think, or you could say, do you purchase your supply from Eversource as default, or something like that? I don't think there's a way of getting around a little bit of like energy vernacular in there, just because it's a specific question. So we'd probably just go one way
Yeah.
or the other.
I'm just thinking if you could start by defining the terms, Electricity is distributed by Eversource. Other options are available,
For supply.
including Eversource, to supply your electricity, which right there, you're going to lose a lot of people.
Right.
So how do you not lose them? I don't know. And then you have an option on your supply. I mean, I'm just trying, it's not simple.
It is not.
But again, I think if they're purchasing third-party supply, they probably know, or somebody in the house knows, right?
Right.
You have to
Yeah, people
opt
that
in.
have, but don't we want everybody to understand it?
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if maybe we should even back up even before we get to asking questions about supplier and third-party
Well, I was trying to
suppliers.
do that as educational. I was
Yeah.
trying to
Yeah.
Yeah.
make
Yeah.
sure that people
Yeah.
understood that there was a difference between your distributor and your
Right.
provider.
That,
What Durham says is, who is your electricity supplier? Note, you may have signed a contract with a so-called third-party supplier. If so, the name of that supplier will appear in the electric supplier service portion of your electric bill. If no supplier name appears, Eversource is your default supplier. And then we could ask them, do you have another supplier?
Yeah.
Or is Eversource the supplier?
But again, even in Durham's case, and I'm sounding a broken record, they focused initially on education around these concepts as part of their educational rollout before they started asking questions about it. Because I think we're seeing how we're trying to word a question to be both educational and allow them to answer it, when I don't know does it really make sense to mix the two initially as opposed to focusing on education initially? I don't know.
I wonder, when we get the aggregated data from Eversource, could they tell us how many people purchased third-party supply?
No, the initial is just the load, the electric load for
The distribution, right?
the town, yeah. But eventually, we will know further downstream how many customers are with default
Third party.
through Eversource or competitive supply, because it's a different approach. You can, if you're with Eversource, you're just gonna be brought into the aggregation and have to opt out.
Right.
If Tommy, you're with a competitive supplier now, you're gonna have the option of opting in.
Right.
You're not gonna be brought into the aggregation because you're with a competitive supplier, you have to opt in. Not gonna take business away from competitive
Sure,
suppliers,
right.
it's just in the middle of the night.
Right.
You know, they're
Right,
gonna,
yeah.
you as a resident have to opt into the aggregation.
So I just want to sort of take the temperature of the room here. We initially had the idea of a survey as a way to get a lot of awareness, and
We can't hear you, John, you're breaking up again. John? Now you're frozen.
Is that in the
Yeah. It's in the.
country?
Out in the country, yeah.
am I getting through okay?
Yeah.
Now you're
Oh,
back.
you were frozen for a minute, but now you're coming back.
Okay. Yeah, we initially had the idea of a survey as something that would kind of wake people up to, are you using the default supplier, or are you buying separately? And if you could buy separately, what would you be interested in buying? So that was our original concept. I think our original thinking was that might pique a lot of interest around the event and provide some valuable data to get us started. So I'm just interested in hearing people, how they feel about the survey. Do we want to stick with that, or do we want to hold off?
Well, I'm in the camp of using the water bill insert as an initial primer around education. You know, what is community power? What are the benefits? What are the role of the distribution company perhaps in that environment? And then with leading them to, you know, you want to learn more, we have this great event coming up, or you can go to the website. And I think that might be, in my opinion, an initial cleaner approach, just to kind of start folks thinking about it, because you're going to get a lot of people that are reading that. Everybody opens their water bill and like, oh, what's this about, you know? You're probably going to get more people that go to the website and take a look than go to the event, but who cares? It's just you're starting the ball rolling. And I'm just relaying what I heard from these other towns, and I spoke to the gentleman in Durham yesterday. They modeled it after Exeter, and they felt. I also, the guy who's coordinating the RFP, Matt Miller from Pembroke, I reached out to him yesterday because I was told by Lisa Sweet that they were doing a survey, and he said they felt very strongly that they needed to do education first, some level of education, and then they were thinking that they would survey at different points in the learning curve and tailor the survey kind of along that process. So I'm just passing along what these other towns have kind of felt that they thought the initial, and one of the towns said, and they just, you know, the woman was kind of a communication person. She referred to their communication plan as light, layered, and linked. Okay, and so they're just really, they said they were kind of building it up like teasing out more and more information as they went along, but they found from a lessons learned perspective that they went light initially, and then, you know, that's what you know, Allison is talking about too in terms of light from a survey perspective, but
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I agree with all that. I guess I have two thoughts. If we're kind of using this survey light to almost help prep the speakers for the event at the end of June, then we should ask them the information that would be most useful to them. Otherwise, I think we should just have this be a really nice primer, a nice education piece, get people to the event, get people to the website, and further down the line, use a survey to start informing our aggregation plan, electric aggregation plan. Because I just worry that if it's so light, the survey, that, and we certainly don't want to confuse people right off the bat.
I think we
I'd
have.
rather use some like teaser questions in this, the primer
Yeah.
piece.
I think we have good vetted language from the coalition around, what is community power, what are the benefits that, there's like four kind of groupings of benefit, and, other information, what's the role of the distribution company, and there's some good graphics to start that process. And I think Durham mentioned to me that, and I don't know how the whole barcode thing works, but the survey's online, and it's active right now, so if you go to the Durham site, it's an active survey. But they also are bringing hard copies of the survey to all sorts of events in town that aren't even related to community power, but other things. So they're trying to get the survey, their plan is to get the survey physically, a paper copy, into the hands of residents, at farmers markets, at this, different things, at Little League Field, wherever.
Like with a card that has just the questions on it or something, or?
I don't know if it's just the
Or a sheet,
paper. I don't know how that works.
So as I've been appearing to be rude, looking at my phone, I was trying to call up my Eversource bill to answer the question about what it says. And there's a section about supplier, and it just says Eversource, which it is. And
Right.
presumably, if it's something
Right,
else,
it's-
it says something else.
Yeah.
But it just,
Yeah.
clearly
And-
says
And one
that.
thing that will be forthcoming, and we have it in Connecticut right now, Eversource does, I'm not we anymore, I'm just a retiree. But we were required by the PUC in Connecticut that there's a segment on the bill every month that compares if you're with a competitive supplier, it compares
they
it
don't
to
do that
it
here.
compares it to the default service, and it tells you in that particular month, based upon the rate that you're paying with your competitive supplier, you either save money or you lost money.
Oh, interesting.
And I think that's going to make its way to Massachusetts and Connecticut. It was kind of an IT issue. But just as we go forward, I think, there will be some transparency to residents in New Hampshire eventually on a monthly basis. They'll see, if we're in the coalition paying 9.9 and Eversource is 10.2, they see they save money this month. If it's the flip, they'll see. And that type of information causes migration of people in and out of the aggregation, because they don't want to lose money.
Right.
That's interesting because I get my power from North American Power and Gas, and mine's 100% renewable, and it says nothing on the bill about the difference between what the default bill would have been versus what I'm paying.
Yeah, they don't have it in New Hampshire yet, or Massachusetts. It's a feature Eversource has in Connecticut that actually the PUC wanted, because so many low-income customers were getting kind of robbed by
Third parties.
suppliers that were kind of giving them teaser rates, bringing them on board, and all of a sudden they didn't realize that they were paying more than they really needed to. So the PUC wanted us to have more transparency with their customer base around what they're paying with a competitive supplier versus default service.
Yeah.
And, because the PUC isn't so much interested in renewables, they're interested in price and wanting to make sure residents aren't paying more than they should. But that feature, you're right, Allison, is not in New Hampshire right now. The people would have to calculate themselves and figure out what the default rate is if they're with a competitive supplier.
Tom and Allison, how are you guys feeling about?
You're cutting out again.
Tom and Allison, how are you guys feeling? Or survey light, am I getting through it all?
You cut out at exactly the same place.
Oh. I'm cursed.
I think I know what you're trying to say, though.
Yeah.
I'm good. Kevin is really obviously thinking that education is required first, because we want to sort of emulate the other towns. So I'm fine with, let's get education out there, and the flyer in the mail should talk about the maybe provide some education, but also talk about the June 29th event where they can learn more.
Okay.
I think surveys are a wonderful idea, just at the right time.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, the one they
Is
get
the,
to.
sorry, Tom, I know you.
Oh, no, I would agree. I mean, I think it's tough to come in. If people get confused, we don't get good results anyway, so. I mean, the intention really is education anyway, so, yeah, I'm good.
Certainly an easier lift.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes our focus a nice one-pager that we can put into the bills, and coming up with the copy for that, maybe drawing on the coalition's FAQ material.
Yeah, this is great. This one is from Lebanon. If you
Is there somebody who'd like to work with?
And it's online,
Becca
that's
on
the
that?
one I just uploaded
Yeah, I'll be glad to do
as
it.
materials with this meeting.
Okay.
So it's that link.
Okay,
I
Okay.
emailed that to you yesterday.
thank you. For some reason, I didn't see that, but I'll look again.
Yeah,
And
if I
maybe
guess-
just use the time we have left to focus on what are the key things we want to say about community power. Certainly, it's a chance for us as a community to use our combined buying power either for cost saving or for more renewables, or if it's possible, both. But that would be me speaking, that's certainly what I used when I was out campaigning. But, let's think about the major things that we want to get across, and then we can have a draft go into practice.
Would we be able, Stephanie, to put a graph?
Yeah,
a-
I think so. I
Yeah.
think if we just give them either a Word document or a PDF, we can, not sure that they can do color. But I'm looking at
Okay.
what is community power and what are the benefits? And these would translate in black and white
Yeah.
just as well.
Right. And I think those two sections in the Hanover thing, section 1 on what is community power and section 7 on what are the benefits, if that language got skinny down and just made it a little, bulleted, a little easier on the eye, perhaps with one of those graphics on what is community power or the benefits, if we could kind of just call out the high points in those two sections into some
That's
reader-friendly
easy enough.
language, I think it would be a great start.
If we did this mock-up, is there someone from Smart Growth that can look at the details of the event, just to make sure we've got the speakers down correctly? And I don't know if it's only Henry and only Julia, or if Lisa Sweet or others, maybe somebody from Exeter. We had talked about maybe expanding the panel, but I'm not privy to discussions with Smart Growth, so, or if we leave it more general.
Nail that down by our May 11th meeting.
Okay. And can you help with a QR code as well?
Yes.
So, I don't know.
Is there any
I
other?
only know the free versions for other things I've worked
Oh,
on, so.
We
I-
have a subscription,
Okay,
so I can
good.
get you that, yes, so that it actually still works a month from
In
now.
a year, yeah, exactly.
I was just going to ask if there's a way to draw them to the event that's not just learn about community power. I don't know what that would be. It could be the speakers, it could be the fact that people are doing it, maybe, so it's community power, but it's, I don't know.
Well, maybe to
Better
the
work on it.
counselor's point about the interest in renewables and in reducing carbon footprint. It's
Yeah,
kind of,
that's
how
what I'm
can you
wondering. Is there
reduce
any?
your
Yeah.
electric bill carbon footprint?
Yeah, can we talk about maybe cost savings, maybe carbon footprint reduction?
Sam's not speaking at that one now, right? Sam Evans-Brown?
I don't know.
The May 9th one, I think, the New Hampshire Network. Is that the one you
Oh,
were
okay.
saying?
Is that the one Allison mentioned?
Yeah, it's Henry Herndon and Lisa Sweet from Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire, and then Sam Evans Brown from Clean Energy New Hampshire. Those are the people that are speaking. And I sent everybody the link.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Would that be acceptable to put up on the city site?
It's, if you're essentially the endorser of the event.
Yeah, it's a city
Site.
committee, right? So,
Yeah, I don't see any
I was just wondering
issues.
if maybe we could get him to speak at the June 29th one, possibly. I can, we have a meeting tomorrow, I can see what they would think about that.
Counselor,
Hi,
could we
Counselor.
potentially get the Herald to do an article around that event? To get another, kind of the next step in a piece in the newspaper?
Oh, yeah, I'd be happy to write a press release or work with Stephanie on a press release and get us some free and friendly publicity.
And just to clarify, for the May 9th New Hampshire Network event, I was asking if it would be kosher to put that up on our, as sort of a educational event. Clearly, it's a different organization, and I don't,
know. Stephanie knows the rules on the website.
Yeah,
probably
what
too.
I definitely could do is put that in the newsletter on Monday. I mean, it is Monday, but I could there isn't a newsletter until Monday, and I could put it through social media, because we do mention third-party events
Events,
and,
okay.
relevant and of interest to citizens. Yeah,
That might be, because I,
certainly do that.
okay.
And the one pager that's going in the water bill, can a little blurb and a link to it also go in the newsletter?
Yes.
So that's another way of
Yep.
Kinda
Yeah,
getting-
once we have whatever we're gonna have our QR code get to, then that also gives us
yeah,
all of the channels, social media, newsletter, webpage.
okay.
And then we'll do maybe another blurb again about once we get closer to the June 29th event. Okay. What is it? Light, layered, and
Layered
linked?
and linked.
Linked.
Okay.
It kind of caught
I
my
like
attention. It made me just, okay, sounds cute.
No, it's good. I remember it.
And Lisa Sweet, by the way, is in charge of the engagement committee for the coalition. There's a variety of committees, and she's the one spearheading that, so she's a really good resource for outreach and what other communities are doing. She's the one who pointed me to the towns that are doing the surveys and connected me with some folks. Very helpful.
Okay, well, we made some decisions. Our next step is to work on the draft of the one pager. Becca and Allison, I'm happy to look at your first take at that on a Zoom call with the two of you, and we could check that out before our meeting Wednesday. We could have Stephanie join us maybe for that. Is that realistic to think in terms of early next week?
Sure.
Yes, I would think so.
Okay. Becca, I know you're just back from.
No,
a
that's
trip,
fine.
so-
No. I think we've
Okay.
got, between all the work that we've done over the last, gosh, has it been
Great.
almost a year in September? I think we've got all the bits and pieces and tools in our toolbox to put together a nice primer page.
That would be super. That would be super.
And I'll confirm tomorrow if we can use graphics, and if we can, I'm pretty sure we can't use color, but I'll
And then-
confirm what it needs to look
We're
like,
assuming one page,
Yeah.
not front back.
and whether we can do.
Do a two-sided, double-sided, yeah.
I have a vague recollection of one color when
Right.
we did the
Yeah, okay.
McIntyre survey, but I could be wrong.
Well, then,
See what
should it
they-
be
we'll see
blue
what
or
they
should it be
say.
green? See, both those colors seem to be energy-friendly colors, so.
Blue or green,
Yeah.
yeah.
Blue or green?
Okay. Thank you all for taking some time. And, you know, it occurs to me too, that one thing that we can do is, we might even be able to do an on-the-spot survey in the 20, to engage people when they're there with a QR code, but save that thought for later. We got plenty of time for that.
Actually, Brian Getz used the Slido platform to do an on-the-spot polling, and the audience sees the results immediately. You access it through your smartphone, and
Exactly.
it's fun. It's
Yeah. Great.
participatory,
Yeah.
interactive.
Yeah, and people on Zoom can join too, if there's a Zoom link. I don't know if there's a Zoom link.
And it does
Yeah.
like live results where it
Yeah.
Yeah.
populates.
Yep.
Those are pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Yep.
Okay, anything else? Again, thanks for the energy on this. And we'll just, what was that trio of words? Light, layered?
Light, layered, and linked. I don't know.
Okay.
Does that resonate with you, Stephanie? You're the
Yes, it
communications
does.
pro.
Sorry, I had to run out of the room. Should I inquire about having Sam come to the 629 event, or, because we were talking about,
Yeah,
okay,
why don't you let me know if he's interested?
okay,
Yeah,
all right.
great.
That'd be great.
If there's no other business, we'll close it out.
Safe travels.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Thanks, Counselor.
Allison.
Bye, Allison.
Bye.
I don't know if you have an electronic copy of that.
This one, okay. I
If you
think
need it.
I think I just got one.
I can give you this thumb drive. It's on there they're both on there.
I'll send you an email, Kevin, because I double checked. I
This
don't think I
one,
got
yeah.
it.
It was on with the meeting notice.
Because the meeting notice was the agenda and the questions that Allison put together, but was
But then,
it from you?
yesterday afternoon, I